Detroit Lions going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this team in 2021. So last year, 2020, 5-11, hot garbage. Not a lot of positives to say about this team, although some interesting ones. You know, their offense before Matthew Stafford was hurt, which was contributed to this record a lot, obviously, was actually pretty good. They were doing some unique things that were making use of the talent they had. Defensively, you know, they were horrible, but there were some pretty clear reasons why. It's not that they didn't have like any talent. It's just they had one of the maybe the worst pass rush in the NFL. They had injuries and bad play at corner. Like there's definitely issues. As far as my record on them, really good, 11-5-1. So you're making money if you're betting with me on the Lions, as you are with almost every team. Yeah, not a lot to complain about. As far as the overall 2018-3, this was such a toss-up team and against certain matchups that whatever, I'm not really disappointed in that not being perfect. There were a lot of games I was just not ever betting on anyway because of the way the Lions play football. But yeah, as far as strong bets, again, 11-5-1, so we chilling. Losses. This team, so coaching change leads to lots of changes in personnel generally. This team moving on from Matt Patricia, who did not work out, everybody knows, pretty garbage, to Dan Campbell. Now, I'm not going to make any judgments on him. He has yet to be a coach in the NFL, head coach. So whatever, I don't really think anything about him. But again, that change does lead to a lot of personnel moves. And all of these guys offensively that they lost are actually like pretty relevant players. Now, obviously they didn't contribute to a super winning team, so you don't want to get too ahead of yourself. But I mean, all these guys or most of these guys are pretty good. Ode Bushi and Joe Dahl, the Lions have been good along the offensive line for years. Both of them have contributed to that. Danny Amendola, despite his age and relative lack of athleticism at this point, was still pretty good, really understood defenses. Matthew Stafford, one of the absolute best quarterbacks in the league. Obviously moving on to the Rams in the trade for Jared Goff, who we'll speak about later, who was comically undersold how good he was on the Lions. Granted, he does have his own issues. I'm not going to pretend like he's perfect, but really good player. And moving on from him is going to lead to some really big changes. Kerryon Johnson, Adrian Peterson, both guys who have been important parts of the backfield for the last couple of years, although for various reasons, you're not losing a lot there. And then the other big ones, Marvin Jones, Kenny Galladay, two starting outside receivers, have been for years with the Lions. And while I do have my own personal problems with them as like actual elite players in the NFL, they're not. They both are extremely useful with the things they do and fit this previous offense at least pretty well. So I'm not going to pretend like they're not big losses despite what I think about them personally. Defensively, kind of same thing where you're losing some good players, not nearly to the same extent here, but Darryl Roberts and Desmond Trufant, both corners who can actually kind of play. Darryl Roberts was asked to do really difficult things in the slot last year. Desmond Trufant faced injuries, but both guys, again, when they're on the field, like good players. Justin Coleman, also one of the better slot corners in the league when he's healthy. He's just been hurt for quite a bit now. Reggie Ragland, Deron Harmon. Reggie Ragland's bad, so I'm not going to talk about him. Deron Harmon actually kind of, despite him not being particularly good himself, he at least offers a skill set that the team doesn't have anymore, which is a concern that we'll get into. As far as additions, though, a lot coming back. You lose a lot, you bring a lot back. Not nearly to the same quality, unfortunately, for the Lions. Offensively, so you do add Jared Goff. I'm going to speak about him in depth when we get to the quarterbacks. Let's just say I'm not super excited about it. You bring in Brashad Perriman. That is actually, I think, a positive move. That guy has been in tough situations a lot of times throughout his career. When he is on the field, he's generally productive, and there's a reason for it. He can do some useful things. Now, he's not he's very, very far from like a number one elite receiver, which is unfortunately what his current position is on this team, but still a useful guy, actually. Khalif Raymond, Damian Rowley, both guys who, again, not particularly good or guys who want on the field for any meaningful number of snaps, but have their own strengths, I guess. Chad Hansen's bad. Jamal Williams is a running back. It doesn't matter. I actually like him. I think he's pretty underrated. He's better than a lot of people give him credit for because he was playing next to such a good player in Aaron Jones in Green Bay. But again, he's not there's only like 4 or 5 running backs. We'll talk about that later. Jamal Williams, whatever. And the last one, Darren Fells, he's actually pretty good tight end. I like that addition. I would like that addition for any team, not as a starter, but as a guy who's going to be on your team. Yeah, for sure. Defensively, here, there's actually stuff I like a little bit more. Michael Brockers is awesome. That guy's been underrated for years. He's way, way more than just like a big fat run defender that for some reason he has the reputation of. He's a like legitimately impactful defensive lineman who gets in the backfield, who can rush the passer. He's really good. Quinn Dunbar also like actively good corner. Now he didn't play very much last year for legal reasons, basically, on the Seahawks, and that hurt them for sure. But yeah, no, he's shown he's on the field. He's a good player. I'm not even particularly worried about him if he gets his chance. Corn Elder, he was the best of a lot of bad options in Carolina as far as the slot corner goes last year. I'm not particularly excited about him, but I don't think he's garbage. So there you go. Dean Marlowe is whatever, backup safety. Charles Harris, former first-round bust, who actually did some okay things in the Falcons last year. We'll talk about more later. And Sean Dan Hamilton, he's not good, but it is what it is. As far as the draft class goes, so with rookies, we'll talk about them once they actually play in the NFL. Until then, I don't think it's good to make judgments because the whole point of this is looking at what you need to know to make money going forward, and just making judgments based on things that historically have shown not to be particularly relevant, namely their college careers or what pundits say about their college careers. I just want to avoid that. So no prejudgments. This is their draft class, though. Yeah, so now we'll talk about position by position, all the players on the team, and go through what they can do, what they will do, what they can't do, and so on. So in the top right corner, that's the total number of the position rank. Quarterbacks is 70, and the number to the right of the name is where that player ranks out of those 70 or whatever number it is. So Jared Goff, 24th ranked quarterback in the NFL. Keep in mind there are not 32 good NFL quarterbacks, right? So while he's listed or ranked as a starter, don't get it twisted that I'm happy if he's starting for your team. So to go in depth on Jared Goff, right, for Lions fans, what you're going to get. He is capable. I'm going to start with the positives. He is capable at times of being maybe like the most accurate quarterback in the NFL. He can do some wild things as far as like throwing the ball to the sidelines, hitting guys in stride. I mean, he can throw at all the different arm angles. He can throw, really hard, really fast over the middle. He can float balls into space. He can hit deep balls at times. He's got some really, really, really high-end throws that are frankly incredible when he does it. The problem is mentally, he is just not good as a quarterback. And, there's all this stuff about how Sean McVay, was talking to him all the way up to the snap and how he's basically telling him what to do. And you can pretty clearly see why that was useful, why he had to do that. And if you watch when he's on the Rams, what would happen once those things either didn't work or the message didn't get conveyed. And it gets ugly really quickly. He just doesn't understand how defenses move. He consistently misreads defenders or defenses as a whole. He tries to do things, he just tries to do weird things. He doesn't push the ball down the field effectively. Like I said, while he can physically make the throws, frequently he will just put, if he throws deep balls, he throws them in such safe ways that it makes it almost impossible for the wide receiver to catch even. What I mean by that, so say you have a go route, right, and two guys running next to each other, he'll throw it so far out and forward to the receiver's side that maybe the receiver, 1 out of 15 times finds the speed to catch up to it. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, it just kind of ends up bouncing 5 yards ahead of where he should have put the ball. And that's a consistent theme with him. And it's not just those deep go routes. It's, anything that's in the intermediate to deep part of the field. And he doesn't really handle being in the pocket well, where there are some quarterbacks who get more dangerous the more time they spend back there. Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, that type of thing. He gets less dangerous. He gets more panicky. His eyes move shorter and shorter as opposed to longer and longer down the field. And he ends up dumping the ball off really quick, even when it's not necessary, which is something we're going to get into as far as how this offense is going to function. That is not good. He'll do some things. I'll guarantee you I'll have some pretty wild highlights, just like he always does. But his baseline is really, really bad, and I'm super worried about the structure around him that is going to be responsible for elevating that baseline because I don't think it's there. Past him, David Blau. As a backup, I actually don't think he's the worst thing in the world, to be honest. he's actually has a fair amount of experience at this point, having played both last year and I believe a couple games the year before. He has some legs to him. He can make short throws with like a little bit of consistency. He's not like the worst player in the world is the point. You could do worse as a backup. You could also do a lot better. And then Tim Boyle coming over the Packers, the guys the Packers and Packers fans have been hyped about for forever. Never really got to play any meaningful snaps in the regular season, so I don't even want to say anything about him. But then at running back, running back again. I mentioned this earlier, but there's only like 3 or 4 or 5 guys in the NFL who even matter. And what you have to do as a running back to matter, right? As far as I'm concerned, is you have to do one of 2 things, right? You either have to be able to turn drives into touchdowns, which means like consistently converting things in the red zone in ways that other running backs can't, or you have to be able to turn plays into touchdowns. Think of a Saquon Barkley or Raheem Mostert, where every touch, is a potential touchdown. And while technically that's true of every running back, there are clear differences in the frequency at which different guys are able to achieve that. And if you're not in that top tier, then you don't really matter. So as far as the Lions guys, DeAndre Swift, he's not one of those guys. He's okay, for sure. There's a gigantic middle class running back where you're more than happy to have them on the field. He is definitely in there. He can do things. If you give him a bunch of carries, he's going to be productive. Don't get it twisted with that. My issue with him is I don't think he particularly breaks or misses tackles very well. He can do it at times, I suppose, but I don't think it's any more than most other running backs around the league. He's not super strong at the point of contact, and while he is fast, he's not like so unbelievably fast that it's this terrifying thing. Jamal Williams, they bring him over for Green Bay. I talked about him earlier. I actually like him as a player. I think he gets underrated. He actually can do some things near and around the line of scrimmage to make defenders miss and or bounce off of him. That gets underrated. He can help turning drives into touchdowns. Overall, he's a useful player for sure. Again, he's nowhere near fast enough to be like in the top tier running backs, but I actually like him as a backup. Fine. Past them, whatever. It's running back depth. I couldn't necessarily care less. Jamar Jefferson, the guy you should kind of liked in college, but again, rookie, who knows? So then we move on to wide receiver. And this is the downfall of this offense pretty clearly. So, again, I'll talk about Rashad Perriman as far as a one-on-one possession guy, especially with his ball skills down the field and the way he uses his body and high points the ball. Like, he's legitimately good at that stuff. Just because not every big-bodied receiver in the NFL is good at that, right? That comes with their reputation, but that's not actually in practice the case. Rashad Perriman, that is the case in practice. He can get up and find the ball and does pretty well with that. Now he has real struggles to separate doing anything that's not, a deep route over a long period of time. He can't barely move or make people miss after the catch. Like he can get shut down by good corners. Like he's not like great or anything, but he's actually, I think, okay and can do some things in certain offenses. Past him though, Tyrell Williams is absolutely horrible. I thought that before he got to the Lions and missed all last year. So now you take that player and he's missed a bunch of time and he's old. Like, I know I haven't listed as starting here. I pray for the Lions' sake they're smart enough to see that shouldn't happen. But yeah, I mean, basically he is just a guy who can run kind of fast in a straight line, who on the Raiders got put into a really unique position where he got pumped targets in an actually kind of smart offense and had some breaks fall right for him. I'm talking about 2 or 3 years ago. I believe 3 years ago when he was like a borderline fantasy wide receiver 1. Most people, I think, remember that year. That is not representative of him as a player. I can guarantee you that. He's not very good. Quintez Cephas, he tries hard. He reminds me a lot, actually, of a modern, like Mohamed Sanu, I think, who also, interestingly, played on this team for a little bit last year. But yeah, he reminds me a little bit of that in terms of or Kendrick Bourne would be another one. Where he tries really hard over the middle. He's not scared of contact. He actually, he's not stupid. He can understand stuff pretty decently, but athletically, he's so limited. I know he has one highlight. I'm going to talk about this play specifically. Maybe you'll remember, maybe you won't. He has a long touchdown last year. I want to say it was against the Rams, might against maybe the Buccaneers, something. He had a long touchdown down the right sideline, which, don't get it twisted. If you watch what actually happened in that play, the corner pretty clearly purposely is like playing him short because he thinks he's going to have the catch-up speed to pick the ball, and he almost does. It ends up being a perfectly placed ball from Matthew Stafford. Like, listen, it does still end up being a touchdown. That's just, it's right at the end of a half, and the corner is very clearly trying to bait a pick. Take from that information, that's just a funny thing I remember specifically about Quintez Cephas. But yeah, as a player for this year, he's going to do some okay things. He can probably handle a decent amount of targets and not be completely unproductive with them. But the question is, how does he really help your offense as opposed to giving those targets to most other receivers around the NFL? And the answer is not much. Depth-wise, Khalif Raymond is actually pretty damn fast in a straight line. He's the type of player, if he's the fourth, fifth receiver on the field and he can snap, he requires attention by somebody at least, because he's going to run really fast in a straight line and he can actually track the ball fairly well. As an actual play-to-play receiver, I'm not excited about him, but that is something to note. Geronimo Allison is absolutely horrid. He's so bad. He doesn't separate, can't move after the catch, can't move in general, can't catch, his hands suck. He's just really, really bad. I'm shocked he's still on the roster. I know he missed all of last year with an injury, I believe. Maybe he even opted out for COVID. Either way, let's be clear about that. Then we got Damian Bradley, a player who's done some things on the Browns. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a rookie some people are excited about. But, Chad Hansen played a couple games, started a couple games for the Texans when they were in really bad injury trouble last year and was bad. So, listen, this receiver room, it sucks. At tight end, it gets a little bit better. T.J. Hawkinson is a player who – I kind of struggle to characterize him, because when I talk about him, I end up saying a lot of negative things, but I don't necessarily think he's a bad player. Like you say, I think he's a top 20 tight end. So basically my thing with him, right, is in theory, he's pretty good, but in practice, he's just kind of okay. As a receiver, while he is fast in a straight line very clearly, he doesn't separate well. He doesn't run routes well. He doesn't use his body well. He can kind of catch outside of his frame if he's by himself, but that's a skill set that doesn't come up very often, and he doesn't really do it through contact very well. He is pretty decent after the catch as far as tight ends go, but he's not at the level of Darren Waller or Jonnu Smith or Gerald Everett. As a blocker, well, again, theoretically, he's a super good athlete, and he did it really well in college. In practice in the NFL, he kind of is, he's above average, I guess. But he's not this dominant guy. He's not George Kittle. Let's be very clear about that. Could he get better? Will he get better? Actually, I would probably expect that to be the case. But as a receiver, I just question the ceiling of his usefulness, because he really hasn't shown or even flash skills that the best tight ends in the NFL have. Past him, like I said, they signed Darren Fells. Darren Fells has one of the strongest sets of hands in the NFL. He does understand defenses. He'll find spaces near the line of scrimmage and intermediate. But he's not much of a blocker himself. He doesn't do anything for your offense as far as creation goes. He's just more of a recipient of good plays or good quarterback play. So, whatever. And then past them, it's a whole bunch of nothing. That's guys who have either are rookie, late undrafted rookies, are guys who haven't broken into the NFL in the regular season, or Jason Cabinda, who's one of the worst fullbacks in the NFL, who's literally a linebacker playing fullback. So, not great there. Then we can talk about the offensive line. Now here, there's a whole lot more hope. This is the best position group on this team. This is one of the best offensive lines likely in the NFL. It's not perfect, and we'll talk about that, but you can get excited about this if you're a Lions fan. So, start with Taylor Decker. Pretty perennially underrated. He's just good. He's a good run blocker who moves dudes off the line of scrimmage. He has the athleticism to compete in space. As a pass protector, he isn't perfect, and he can struggle with the high end of stuff. But okay, there are very few tackles who don't, and he's not even that bad about it. Overall, dude's good. Penei Sewell, he's a rookie, so I'm going to hold off on calling him Jonathan Ogden or whatever everybody says he's going to be. But there's a lot of hope for him for sure. And I think generally first-round highly drafted tackles, at least recently, do end up being pretty decent. Obviously, all four that were drafted last year ended up being good. Even Andrew Thomas, after the Giants won, after his rough start to the year, ended up being pretty good. Like, there's definitely hope, or more than hope, there's expectation for him to be good, which I'll lean into a little bit. But you got to remember, every rookie tackle also kind of struggles at the beginning of their rookie year, not because of physical reasons, but because mentally they're just going to make mistakes, probably. Past that, this is the deepest tackle position across the NFL. I can guarantee you that. Tyrell Crosby should be starting on a team. He's like legitimately good. He's a really good pass protector as a run blocker. He's fine, which is a skill set. Again, he should be starting on a team if a team wants to make a trade. Come here. Lions have him. And Matt Nelson, frankly. Matt Nelson played some games last year after some injuries. And that dude can ball too. Like, they have 4 starting caliber tackles. And like good tackles, to be frank. And that's really exciting. As far as team building goes, obviously a lot more issues, but that's something to keep in mind. At guard, Hal Vaitai, he's fine. Actually, I like him a whole lot better at guard than a tackle. And while he is still slow laterally and will become an issue in pass protection, he is definitely the weak link in this line. If he's your weak link, you're fine. Because he's still pretty good. Jonah Jackson as a rookie was good. Again, he's not perfect. He makes mental mistakes still. He's kind of in this decently sized, like not middle class, like upper middle class of guards who you're definitely comfortable starting, but who are, going to give you issues game to game kind of, or play, so they're going to have some issues at some plays. But overall, definitely we're starting. Really excited about that. Then Logan Stenberg, he's a rookie that I believe he started week 1 for them last year. He wasn't particularly bad, so that's something. Not so much depth there. Then you get to center, Frank Ragnow. I think very comfortably the best center in the NFL. That dude kills people. He's elite in pass protection. He's amazing. He just every possible positive I could describe about like a center Frank Ragnow has, outside of, he's not as fast as like Jason Kelsey down the field, which oops, like he's amazing. So yeah, as an offense as a whole, right, there's parts that I'm encouraged about, but I really worry about what actually causes this team to have success offensively. Because I think the most obvious thing you can point at is the offensive line that I mentioned, but it's not like their offensive line is like nuts. It's not like the Browns out here where they're just going to be destroying people, right? They're just good. They're not going to get beat. And you have Jared Goff at quarterback, who we talked about, and then you have a bunch of receivers who are either going to not get open or like barely get open. And that does not lead to a lot of positive outcomes. I think this team is more or less going to be dependent on facing a front seven that's weak enough for them to function the way the Browns offensive line does, like killing people, or a team with such bad enough corners or a secondary where their lack of talent or receiver, that gets brought closer to even. Generally, even ties go to offenses in almost every case. So that's not encouraging. Is the point. I don't think it's impossible that they don't suck. And I suppose Jared Goff could get better. No, I don't really suppose Jared Goff could get better. But I suppose there's ways for this team to succeed on a couple drives a game, right? But on a consistency basis, they're really going to struggle. And if they play, good, tough matchups, man, it could get bad. Defensively, still interesting to talk about. I don't know if it's a whole lot more encouraging, but definitely interesting. So they've been playing, right, this for however long they've had Matt Patricia. They've been playing this just weird multiple defensive fronts that comes from the Patriots system, Bill Belichick. And they sucked at it. Now they're going to Anthony Lynn as a new defensive coordinator who's played this also kind of weird multiple front from the Chargers. But he doesn't suck at it, or at least he hasn't before. Now, he's not working with nearly the same level of talent, but there's at least a little bit of hope there. So player-wise specifically, start along the front. This doesn't look great, but I actually kind of have a kind of suspicion that they're going to be okay at this position. Because when you talk about the players individually, Right. I'm actually going to start with Michael Brockers because I talked about him earlier. I'll talk about it again. I'll talk about however much somebody wants to listen. The dude's good. The dude can absolutely play. He's a meaningful defensive tackle in the NFL. So you have him, right? You have Nick Williams, who I don't like as a every down player, but like the dude is kind of strong. Like he doesn't suck against the run, right? And then you have Levi Wuzurike, who again, rookie. I don't want to make any judgments, but theoretically provides a lot of stuff they need. And you have Deshaun Hand, who's actually pretty good. That 63rd is actually him rated as an edge defender. It's with the Lions, they've been going back and forth so much. That's going to happen sometimes. But like the dude can he's strong enough to like play. The dude does things. He causes penetrations. The point is, overall, I think that they're not like screwed at that position. Even Jayshon Cornell, not a rookie, that should be not applicable. And Kevin Strong have played before and not like been the worst thing ever. So I think they have a chance there to not suck. And at nose tackle, I mean, John Pinasini showed that he can be like one of this big class of fat guys who doesn't get pushed around, which is a useful skill. And Ali McNeil's a rookie that a lot of people are excited about. So while they are leaning on rookies, and because of that, I don't want to make judgments, declarations about how good they can be, I'm a little bit encouraged about this position group, just a little bit. And edge is actually kind of the same way. Their high-end stuff, it's not great, but Trey Flowers I like still, despite his kind of more struggles with the Lions. And Romeo Okwara I've liked for a long time, and he finally showed that to other people last year. So yeah, I like them. Now, I am worried about the talk out of camp and the way that they're going to use it. These guys, where it sounds like they're going to stick them out as like true stand-up 3-4 outside linebackers and ask them to play in space. That scares me because both of these guys are just oversized for that. And in the modern NFL, I would get really worried about them just getting left in the dust a lot. We'll see if that actually happens. My guess would be no. I think that Anthony Lynn is probably smarter than that. But as players specifically, to get back to that, yeah, Trey Flowers plays the run like really, really well. He has, some hand. He can use his hands okay as a pass rusher. He can cause some penetration. Romeo Okwara is actual and meaningful pass rusher at times against, he's not going to be like really good tackles. If you put him up against like Trent Williams or something, don't expect much. But most teams don't have Trent Williams, and when he's not against that, maybe. Austin Bryant has had tons of health issues, but I actually think when he's on the field, he's pretty good. Julian Okwara, he was a rookie last year who barely got to play at the beginning of the year before he himself was out for the season. But he, there was at least he flashed the athleticism for me to, kind of stand up and be like, there's something there. Charles Harris, I mentioned earlier, is a first-round bust, which is true. But even he, I think, maybe has gotten some really unfair situations to be put in across the NFL in his time there and can do a little bit of something. So, they would lack the high end. I don't think the ceiling of the position group is very high, but I think it's some guys who can play for sure. And the only other one I'll kind of talk about here is Jelani Tavai. He, is he going to be a stand-up linebacker? I only have him listed as an edge because under Matt Patricia, he played a lot of like overhang, walked up to the line of scrimmage linebacker. He's not an actual edge rusher at all, to be clear. He's not good either, but he can at least play that like strong edge a little bit okay. And then we have off-ball linebacker, and it's another spot that I'm like a little bit encouraged about. Jamie Collins is really good. He's been really good the whole time. He had a couple, down years on the Browns when he was just being asked to do ridiculous things. But when he's put in like positive positions as a middle linebacker in a defense, like he's consistently really good. And that's still true with the Lions. Alex Anzalone, I don't particularly like as a player, but he's your second linebacker in a overall talented defense. He's going to be pretty decent. Now, obviously that doesn't exactly apply here. Not nearly as much as it did when he's on the Saints, but I don't think he's like the worst thing in the world. He's not going to be the sole cause of your defense sucking, which is saying something. And in depth, Derek Barnes is a rookie they're kind of excited about. And Shondae Hamilton, I don't like at all as a player because he's so bad in pass coverage. But there's, I suppose, ways for him to be useful in an NFL field at times. Yeah. And then we get to corner. And actually, I think this is another position. It's really similar where they lack the high end, and I don't really like what they have, but there are pieces here, and I think there's a chance that they don't suck. On outside corner, right, you kind of have four guys who I have like a little bit of expectation of. Jeff Okudah was not good as a rookie, but a large part of him not being good, so he was hurt a lot of the time, both at the beginning and at the end and in the middle. But what he was asked to do was clearly weird. Right, because he had this reputation as, kind of like bigger, shutdown, do-it-all man corner and all that stuff. But especially when he was first on the field, he was playing so soft all the time. And he was getting killed for it. But that begs the question of, is that just how he plays? Or was he being told to do that by a bad coaching staff? And so while normally I don't like to make assumptions like that, he's a unique instance in that it was so obvious what was kind of wrong that I wonder if it might get fixed and fixed really quickly. Amani Oruwariye, he's actually, as far as these like big, slow, laterally outside corners that are in the NFL that are kind of getting weeded out now because they're generally pretty bad. He's one of the better ones, in a class of like Rocky Sin or the Seahawks guys, Trey Flowers, that type of guy. He's actually, I think, better than all of them. He's not ideal. He's not someone I really want on the field as my starting outside corner, but I do think you could do worse, and he has at least a place. You have Quentin Dunbar, who I mentioned earlier, is like good. He is a modern type NFL corner who can keep up at least a little bit with some of these types of receivers and kill people like a Robert Woods or Stephon Diggs. He cannot notice I said kind of keep up, not like shut down, but that's a useful skill set. And then if you Ifeatu Melifonwu, again, another rookie, and this team is the most I've talked about rookies this whole time, but there's just there's chances if those rookies don't suck, and they're all fairly high and or hyped prospects, that they could have position groups that are not that bad. And even at slot corner, right? So you have Corn Elder, who, like I said, I'm not particularly a fan of, but he was playing in the worst secondary in the NFL with the Panthers last year, one of the worst with the Panthers last year, and even kind of the year before. So he was put in really tough spots, and he actually performed admirably at slot corner for them. Again, not ideal, but, you can only ask for so much when you're in that type of position. So I think there's a chance there. And then Mike Ford, too. Mike Ford, I know he's unranked there, but he's actually played enough snaps for me to be like, to show some things where I'm like, maybe. So, another spot that's kind of like, it's not doomed. Then at safety, the last position here. This one may be a little bit more doomed. Tracy Walker, he does things that I like, especially as like a in the box tight end man coverage dude who is not asked to do a lot else. I think he actually functions in that role pretty decently. Problem is, that's not really a role that you can like stick your starting safety in and not ask him to do anything else. And when he is asked to do other things, I don't think he's a particularly good run defender. Despite being a box safety, he's not good. He is not good as like a zone player or a guy in coverage down the field. And that stuff's concerning. I really like him as a third. I love him as a third safety on a team, on a good defensive team. On this team, though, is like they're starting. You're going to run into issues. Will Harris is kind of that same thing, but he's just not as good at the good things and maybe a little bit better in run support. And then past that, I don't know what the hell they're going to do. So CJ Moore played a little bit. He's way more of a special teams player, though. I'm not sure because I can't imagine they start Tracy Walker and Will Harris next to each other. Their limitations in coverage. So maybe CJ Moore Dean Marlowe is actually – he's the same thing as those other two, Tracy Walker and Will Harris. He's the same thing where he's just like a bigger box safety who's in his career basically only been asked to cover tight ends. And he didn't even do that well. And then it's a bunch of guys who are either – like first, second, third-year players who haven't been good enough to get on the field, or a rookie who's maybe he was undrafted, I believe. So that spot suffer. And as a defense as a whole, like I said, well, I can look at each of these position groups and say, you know what, I can see a path to them not sucking. What you have to ask yourself is when they're going against real NFL offenses, how do they stop people And I don't think you can really come up with ways that they can. They haven't, like I said, maybe Jeff Okudah becomes pretty good. I really like Jamie Collins. I think their edge players are decent. But when you're talking about the way that real NFL function, like offenses are going to play against them, I get really worried that they're going to be able to stand up for, let alone a game, like a half. And there are black holes here. I mean, especially at safety. So, yeah. And while I think, again, I mentioned too that I think they're going to be pretty stout in run defense most of the time, they're not going to be so good there that it makes the other team one-dimensional, and they're nowhere near good enough in pass coverage to take advantage of that. And, yeah, it's tough. So when we look at the schedule as a whole, I mean, yeah, it's tough. That's kind of all you have to say with the Lions this year. And everybody knows that going in, this team's not going to be very good. So I'm not going to, pretend that I'm the first one to see that. But if you look at why and then what the teams are matching up against, yeah, I get really, really scared because offensively, I don't know who they can have success with until you get to maybe the Bengals, maybe, and then the Eagles, past that. And then defensively, who can they stop? Again, the Bears would be the one, I suppose. I actually think they match up with decently, but they're going to get killed by the Packers and Ravens and 49ers and the Vikings. It's just tough for them. And while there is a chance that they all come together and this is actually a more middle of the road team, I think that is depending so much on rookies, a lot of rookies who aren't even all first round picks or anything, playing way better than rookies historically do, that I don't have a lot of hope. So, yeah, that is the 2021 Detroit Lions. Yikes.